All right, welcome. Today, we're going to dive into an ancient text that, believe it or not, has a ton to say about our very modern search for security. We're going to unpack our 2,000-year-old story about building bigger barns, might just reveal what's really going on in our own hearts today.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. On one hand, you've got the stuff we all worry about, right? Job security, having enough in savings, what people think of us, our social status. That stuff feels so real, so immediate. But then you look at this text, Luke 12, and it completely flips the script. It's worried about a whole different set of things: hypocrisy, greed, and the actual condition of your soul. And that contrast, that's the tension we're going to explore.
So picture the scene. It opens, and it's tense. There's this massive crowd, thousands and thousands of people all gathered around. You can just feel this opposition building in the air. And it's right here, in this charged atmosphere, that Jesus starts teaching his closest followers about a danger that's way closer than they think.
He kicks things off with this kind of strange warning. He says, "Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees," which is hypocrisy. Now, that metaphor is so powerful. Think about yeast or leaven. It's tiny. It gets hidden away inside the dough, but it spreads silently until it affects the entire loaf. And that's the picture of hypocrisy he's painting. This hidden, internal corruption that can quietly take over everything, even when the outside looks perfectly fine.
And this leads to what is really a foundational principle for this whole passage. The text basically says, look, in the end, nothing can stay hidden forever. All those secret motives, that internal corruption we just talked about, all of it is eventually going to be brought out into the light. And this idea, it's going to be absolutely crucial when we get to the parable in a few minutes.
So, if you shouldn't be worried about keeping up appearances, what should you be concerned about? Well, the text draws this really sharp line between two different kinds of fear. On one side, there's the fear of what people can do to you, which, when you think about it, is pretty limited. They can only harm your body. But then there's what the text calls a proper fear of God. And this isn't about being terrified, it's about having this deep reverence for what's ultimately real, for ultimate authority.
Okay, so Jesus is talking about these huge life and death themes, right? Loyalty, persecution, things that matter for eternity. And then, bam, the entire conversation just screeches to a halt because of this totally random interruption from someone in the crowd.
Someone just yells it out. "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." I mean, can you feel how jarring that is? In 1 second, the focus snaps from the fate of the human soul to a family squabble over money and property, from ultimate reality to a personal financial dispute.
So why does this matter? Well, because Jesus doesn't just brush the guy off. He uses this interruption like a diagnostic tool. He sees right through the request and realizes that this obsession with an inheritance points to a much deeper, much more common problem that's at the very heart of our anxiety: greed.
And to address that root issue, he tells what becomes one of his most famous stories, the parable of the rich fool. This isn't just some random story. It's his direct answer to the man's request, and more importantly, to the whole mindset behind it.
Now, it's really important we understand the guy in this story. First off, he was already rich. Then, he has a great year. His land produces this incredible surplus. But the key point here is that the text never, ever condemns him for being successful or for being wealthy. The problem isn't what he has. It's all about what he does with what he has.
And what's amazing is we get to listen in on his internal monologue. It's a masterclass in self-obsession. The logic builds really fast. First, he thinks, what am I going to do? I have no place to store my crops.
Then he thinks, I know. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones.
And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And finally, and then I'll say to my soul, "Soul, you've got plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry." You hear it, right? It's just I, my. And his self-focus reveals everything that's missing from his worldview. There's no thought of God, no mention of his community, zero gratitude, and definitely no generosity.
So you can actually map out his entire belief system. He thinks that more storage is going to lead to more security, and more security will give him more control. And ultimately, more control will guarantee him more life, a better life, a secure life. He's building his whole future on this one idea, that life consists in the abundance of his possessions.
So the man thinks he has it all figured out. He's got his retirement plan locked in. It's all relaxation and self-indulgence from here on out. But his story is about to take a very sharp and very unexpected turn.
God breaks into his private monologue with this absolutely devastating verdict.
You fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. The punchline is just brutal. It is the ultimate illusion of control shattered in a single sentence. The man thought he owned his future, but it turns out he didn't even own his next breath. His life was never his to control. It was always on loan.
Now, when the text calls this man a fool, it's really important to understand that this isn't just a simple insult. It's actually a very specific diagnosis of a deeply flawed worldview. See, a fool in this context is someone who lives their life as if God just doesn't exist, or at the very least, doesn't matter. It's someone who has fundamentally misjudged what's real and what's going to last. They've built their whole life on a foundation that just can't hold up.
So to be super clear, why exactly was he a fool? It wasn't because he was rich. It was 1, because he planned his entire future with zero thought for eternity. 2, he piled up all his wealth just for himself with no generosity. And 3, and this is the big one, he placed all his trust, his ultimate security, in his stuff instead of in God.
But the parable doesn't just end there with a stern warning. It actually concludes by offering this really powerful alternative, a completely different way to think about what it means to be truly wealthy.
And it really lays out these 2 different paths. On one side, you can be rich for oneself. You store up treasure, you trust your possessions, and you plan without any thought of eternity. Or you can be rich toward God. And what does that mean? It means you invest in things that last, you put your trust in God, and you plan your life around generosity. That, right there, is the central lesson.
And this is where this ancient story gets really personal. Because our modern barns, they might not be made of wooden nails. There are savings accounts, our university degrees, our job titles, even our carefully crafted image on social media. Now, none of these things are bad in themselves, of course not, but they can so easily become the modern pillars of our security, the things we check on to reassure ourselves that we're safe and that we matter.
And all of this leads us to the final provocative question that this whole passage leaves us with. It's not just about what you have in your barns, but what your barns are fundamentally built of. When all comes down to it, where are you placing your ultimate trust for your future?